In the fall of 2007, a quiet community was shaken by a discovery that felt more like a scene from a horror film than real life. Inside an abandoned house, police found the body of a young woman. The setting was disturbing, the circumstances unsettling, and the symbolism surrounding the crime raised immediate questions. The victim was Catherine Blauvelt, a young mother who had been reported missing weeks earlier. Her husband, 28-year-old John Blauvelt, stood before cameras and investigators as a grieving spouse, calm, cooperative, and seemingly devastated by the loss of his wife. But behind that composed exterior was a truth that would take years to uncover. As detectives examined the scene, they were faced with more questions than answers. Why this location? Why the unusual markings left behind? And why did the husband, who appeared to be helping the investigation, never seem to fall under serious suspicion? At the time, no one could have imagined that the man pleading for answers already knew exactly what had happened. John and Catherine Blauvelt appeared to live a normal American life. Married, raising children, and navigating the everyday challenges of adulthood, there were few outward signs of the darkness beneath the surface. But those closest to the couple later described a marriage strained by control, secrecy, and escalating tension. When Catherine disappeared, John reported her missing and actively participated in interviews. He spoke calmly, showing little emotion but enough concern to avoid alarm. To investigators, he looked like many spouses before him, worried, confused, and desperate for answers. Meanwhile, the investigation struggled to gain traction. There were no clear witnesses, no immediate suspects, and little physical evidence pointing in any specific direction. The abandoned house where Catherine's body was eventually found offered more confusion than clarity. The crime scene suggested intentional misdirection, as if someone wanted investigators focused on symbols instead of suspects. What detectives didn't yet know was that John Blauvelt had military experience. He understood discipline, planning, and how to operate without drawing attention. These skills, once meant for service, would later be viewed as tools that helped him stay ahead of law enforcement. As weeks turned into months, the case began to cool. Public interest faded, leads dried up, and John slowly faded from the spotlight. He relocated, blending into new surroundings, creating distance between himself and the crime. By the time investigators began re-examining inconsistencies in the statements, John Blauvelt was already gone. Years passed before the case resurfaced with renewed urgency. Advances in forensic analysis and a closer review of the timeline began to expose cracks in the narrative John had carefully constructed. Investigators noticed patterns, subtle contradictions, unexplained movements, and behaviors that no longer aligned with innocence. Authorities eventually traced John's movements across state lines. He had started a new life under the radar, living in a different state, in a new home, and presented himself as someone entirely removed from his past. Even more alarming was the revelation that he was now involved in a relationship with a teenage girl, raising serious concerns and accelerating efforts to locate him. When law enforcement finally closed in, the image of the grieving husband collapsed. Evidence accumulated, pointing not to an unknown intruder or ritualistic killer, but to a calculated act committed by someone Catherine trusted most. John Blauvelt was arrested and extradited back to face charges. In court, the methodical nature of the crime became clear. What once appeared to be a baffling mystery was revealed as a deliberate attempt to deceive investigators, delay justice, and disappear into anonymity. After years of evading accountability, John Blauvelt was convicted of his wife's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Catherine's family, justice came but only after years of uncertainty, unanswered questions, and loss. The case of John Blauvelt is a stark reminder that some of the most dangerous individuals do not appear dangerous at all. They blend into everyday life, present convincing facades, and exploit trust both personal and institutional. This investigation highlights how patience, persistence, and re-examination can ultimately uncover the truth, even when it seems lost. It also exposes the limitations investigators face when a crime is carefully planned and intentionally misleading. For years, the truth vanished beneath layers of deception, but it did not disappear forever. Cases like this continue to shape how law enforcement approaches missing persons investigations, emphasizing the importance of revisiting cold cases and questioning assumptions even when the answers are uncomfortable. At the Vanishing Truth, these are the stories we examine, not for shock value, but to understand how justice can be delayed and why it must never be abandoned. Because even when the truth vanishes, it leaves behind echoes, and eventually, those echoes demand to be heard.